Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Nightingale, and you are watching the Common Sanctuary broadcast today. I'm super excited. I've got a really cool guest with me today. Her name is Natalie Drew, and she and I have been Twitter mutuals for several years now, and I always enjoy any interactions that I have with her. She's taught me a lot about what it means to be a trans woman. She's taught me a lot about what it means to be a woman of faith. She's taught me a lot about what it means to be a trans woman of faith in the Twitter sphere, and how to interact with people in a loving and godly way while being an activist, while advocating for people. And it's not always easy. She takes a lot of heat. I do too. I think she and I kind of have that in common. And that's one of the things that I really love about her. I feel like we're siblings out there in Twitter land, doing this work together. So I've been really excited about this conversation. Common Sanctuary is a nonprofit organization that I founded a couple of years ago. We exist at this intersection of LGBTQ plus and Christianity. It's been a real joy to slowly be building this over the last couple of years. We have these kinds of conversations periodically. There's several of them hosted over on my YouTube channel, and I encourage you to go check out previous conversations that I've had. We're streaming live here on Facebook Live and on YouTube. We'll be here for about the next hour. And so please feel free to jump in the chat and say hello. Some of you are already saying hi. Hello, Jill. Glad to see you here. Feel free to say hi in the chat. We'll give you an opportunity for some questions and responses toward the end of our conversation today. But I'm going to go ahead and welcome Natalie to the conversation. Hi, Natalie.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's been a long weekend, busy weekend, but it's been a fun one, and things are going good. And thank you for having me.
Of course. It's so good to see you. Yeah, you've had a super busy weekend. You've been breaking the internet with some of these photos I've seen on Twitter, you and some of your famous friends.
I mean, I feel like I'm just like that person getting a picture with the celebrities. But no, it's been fun. Just that Twitter community that I've gotten to know, and it's like Twitter friends are friends.
Absolutely. I'm just going to pop some of these up here. So we've got Jill saying hi. We've got Faith. Hello, Faith. We've got Bethany and Karen. Hello, Karen. We've got Jaren and Melissa tuning in. Hello. We've got Heather Drew. I think you might know Heather, possibly tuning in from the next room. Hi, Heather. We've got James. Hello, James. We've got Hannah. Hello, Hannah. I think you are Neuroscience Girl on Twitter. And yeah, Hannah's smiling. So yes, so glad that you are all here with us. We really appreciate your being here. So Natalie, we're just going to dive into the deep. Will you please start by just telling us a little bit about your story? Tell us, tell us everything.
Okay, so my story. I was born in East Texas, born in Tyler, Texas. And at the time, I was born into the independent fundamental Baptist world. And if anybody is aware of that world, I often refer to it as a cult, because that's exactly what it is. And it operates like that. It sustains itself and grows through the same practices you see in a cult. And so I was born in 79, and I would say I was born in the Carter administration. And, it was probably about 5 or 6 that I started realizing that I wasn't like the boys. And it was one of those things that was hard to put, kind of really pinpoint and especially give words to. This was the mid 1980s. The only thing you heard about the LGBTQ community was the AIDS crisis. Mm-hmm. And the coverage was not favorable. The only thing I heard in our churches was about how gay people are evil, how they're going to go burn in hell. Yeah. Every weekend was a hellfire and brimstone service. If you're familiar with the IFB, that's what they specialize in, King James only. And So even if I did have the vocabulary to articulate who I was and what I was feeling and struggling with, I didn't have the space to do it, to safely do it. There in that IFB world, there's a series of schools called Lester Roloff schools, and they're basically the IFB version of military school. That's where you send your troubled kids. And in that world, troubled kids are kids who disobey or kids who are gay. And so you send your kids to these schools, and that was the persistent and common threat growing up. If you don't stop, we're going to send you to a roll-off school. And so even if I did have that language, I had no safe place to articulate that. So I did what so many young trans kids do. I kind of shoved it way down. Like, okay, maybe if I can just, this is me being a wicked sinner. This is me on that path, that wide path to hell. And so I prayed. The sinner's prayer was a nightly routine for me throughout my entire childhood, because when you can't get this innate knowledge out of your mind, you think it's because you're a reprobate, that you're going to burn in hell, that that God doesn't even love you at that point.
Natalie, can I jump in and ask a question? I encounter people almost every day on Twitter who are like, they deny that the idea even or the existence of a trans kid can't be. Like, trans kid, there's no such thing as a trans kid. I hear this every day. So you were a little trans kid, but you didn't have the language for that when you were little. Can you describe to us like what that experience was like for you? You said you knew you were not like the other boys when you were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, but what was that like when you were little? How would you describe that experience?
There's been a couple ways I've described this in the past. Almost kind of like a rubber band that is at that moment of full tension. And it's living this life where you just feel like you're about to pop something. I don't know if it's this internal anxiety, but just, there's this constant tension. And a lot of it's fueled by what you hear every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, when you go door-to-door soul winning, all that stuff. And so there's that constant just kind of like feeling like I just wanted to erupt. And but with gender dysphoria, the way I've really, I guess what's connected most with me and kind of helping me understand it or helping me explain it, it's like walking through like if you're in a dark forest and it is dark, it is foggy, all you can see is like that faint moonlight, but you can't see where you're stepping, and it's this foreboding sense of fear, anxiety, like you don't know what's about to happen, you don't know what's about to pop out from the general vicinity that you're at, but you just can't, there's no safety in it, there's this constant fear. And that's what it was like, is just constantly living that fear of constantly being found out. I was actually talking with Heather the other day about this. Growing up, and I'm sure a lot, especially trans girls who lived in the 80s, and we didn't have the internet. And, it was that Sears catalog, like, oh, I hope they don't see me, like, just looking at the clothes and, that constant fear of like, what if they see me glaring too long, and having to be guarded in everything I said, having to play that uber masculine role. Every day was a performance, and to perform who everybody thought I should be. I was that, they thought I should have been that, especially in the IFB world where it is the epitome of a patriarchal world.
Right.
And it's so you're having to kind of this fear of like, what if they find out that I don't want, Like I could be on the top of the pyramid in that world,
Mm.
and it just wasn't who I was. And then that confusion of not having the language and not
Mhm.
having any role models, because I was in such a bubble
Right.
and with no exposure. At least some kids, like if they were in those not IFB world, they may have some exposure given how maybe progressive their parents were. But I was in the most restrictive of bubbles, and
Mhm.
so I had nobody to look to, nobody to say, okay, I could do that. I could be that.
Right.
Like, oh, you can really be who that is. And
Mm.
so it's just that constant fear.
Would you have said, like, I don't know, when you were that young person feeling all that tension, feeling all that, uh, what you now know was dysphoria, gender
Mhm.
dysphoria. Was there any conscious thought that it had to do with your gender? Did you think I'm really a girl, or I want to be a girl? Was there conscious thoughts like that?
Yeah, it was. I noticed that most when probably as I was 11,
Mm.
12, 13 years old,
Mhm.
um, that nightly prayer for
Mm.
me, where, like a good IFB kid, I've been saved and baptized. Well, saved a million times,
Right.
baptized 3 times, because yeah, every time you sin, you're going to burn in hell, and every sin is a sign that you're not truly a Christian.
Mm.
But I remember about 11, 12, 13 years old, that prayer of um, that I said throughout my childhood of just saying the sinner's prayer started becoming, God, please, I I do, and I still to this day truly believe that God is the God of miracles.
Mhm.
And I would pray, God, I know I truly believe that you are a God of miracles. Just do this one. Like that classic, if you do this one thing for me, God, I promise I will never ask for anything
Mm.
again. I know that you can change everybody's memories. You can, like,
Mm.
poof, I can wake up as a girl and you can change everybody's memories and nobody will know. Like, just do that or kill me. And
Mm.
that became that nightly prayer for me throughout my teenage years was
Wow.
like, make this miracle happen or just make this pain go away and
Mm.
let me end it. And so it was hard because,
Mhm.
again, having that cultural conversation about these issues. Now, granted, things are not great right now, but having this conversation has given so many young people the ability to avoid that.
Yeah.
That of growing up as a trans child in a conservative world in the mid 1980s, and so um, but it was tough. I mean, but I knew I was having those conscious thoughts at 11, 12, 13
Mm.
years old, like, God, please make me a girl.
Wow.
Um, you know, at the time, and of course God doesn't work like that, and but now I look back, I'm like, oh, God was saying the whole time, I did.
Mm.
And you just have to accept who I've made you to be.
Wow.
And when I was that young, I you know, that was my nightly prayer.
You know what I think is so fascinating? I mean, I'm just relating to that a lot. I was a little gay boy growing
Mhm.
up in very much fundamentalist Christian circles. And I too I wasn't praying, God make me a girl, but I
Yeah,
remember kind of fantasizing about how nice it would be if I could just be a girl.
yeah,
And it was because it's not that I felt like I was actually a girl or wanted
mhm,
to even be a girl. I was very comfortable as a boy. I knew
yeah,
that I was kind of meant to be a boy, but I just wanted to be with a boy
yes,
so bad. I was so drawn to other guys. And I
yeah,
just thought, knowing my place in the world, knowing that that was never going to be possible for me,
yeah,
I just thought, oh, what I wouldn't give to be a girl so that I could
yeah,
fall in love with a man and get married and be happily ever after and have no problem. Right.
yeah. That heteronormativity that's
Yeah.
baked into all of us. Um, I don't like the misuse of this term, but with the way certain elements of our political society use the term grooming,
Right.
that heteronormativity is a great, if they are going to redefine the word, then they're going to realize that that quickly gets turned around on them, because when, like in your childhood mind, the only way you could see being with a man would be like, well, if I'm a girl.
Right. If I'm a girl, that's the only
Yeah.
way.
And so,
Right. Wow. So there you are, 11, 12, 13, just praying to God
yeah.
every night, either make me a girl or kill me.
Yeah. And, you know, I did what a lot of trans, especially trans girls do. There's like this phenomenon that we talk about in our community, that flight to hypermasculinity. Like, okay, guys, you're not going to do this for me. Fine. I will beat it out of myself. I will become the manliest man possible.
Wow.
And, you know, so I did all the things that society expected of me. I played football. I played baseball. I played basketball. I got in fights. In fifth grade, I stopped counting around 50 fights that I got into at school. And back then, you didn't get suspended right away. And I was getting, I think in middle school, junior high, I got suspended in school or out of school 6 times because of fighting. I became very violent, very aggressive, because if I can't be who I know I am, then that's really the only, you know, the word performative gets used a lot when it comes to especially trans women, because we tend to be the biggest target for the right. They say this is performative womanhood. My whole childhood was a display of performative manhood. Yeah. I was just trying to act a part and be who everybody thought I should be, and it was making me angry. And that anger led to violence. Wow. And so I really struggled with that growing up. I struggled with eating disorders. I've shared this before on Twitter. My 5th grade English teacher, Mr. Hart, he one day he called me up to the front of class. I was a pudgy, I don't know what the right term is, and but you know, and so I went up to the front of the class because he called me up to his desk, and he's like, you know, you have Dunlap disease, and this is in front of all the kids, and I'm like, no clue what that is, and he's like, your belly's Dunlapped over your belt.
Oh my gosh.
And that was one of the earliest, and that was in 5th grade. That's one of those moments that obviously still sticks with me. Yeah. And, you know, and especially as we see in our society, how this unrealistic expectation of beauty, especially feminine beauty, and how it's imposed, and the psychological effect it has on so many women, whether they're cisgender or transgender, the psychological impact, and a lot of it's, you know, and I had to struggle with that, because in my mind, I know that's who I am, but I can't tell people about my eating disorder because they all think I'm a boy, and boys don't get eating disorders. Right. You know, that's a girl thing. And so that was another one of those aspects I had to hide in public, or hide from everybody, because, you know, and it's hard when, you know, my struggle was with bulimia, and I've been very open about this. And for, like, honestly, I don't want to say what cured me, because what helped me along that road of recovery more than anything was transitioning. And, but you get this mental image of like, oh, this is what beautiful looks like. It's, you know, I'm going to date myself here. It's Claudia Schiffer. It's Cindy Crawford. Yeah. And so here I was as a young child trying to look like them without anybody realizing I'm trying to look like them. Right. And it was just like this, like everywhere I turned was this constant torment. And so that was kind of like that life, growing up. And, the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church is a very abusive world, physically abusive, emotionally and spiritually abusive. I remember we were at we went to the Fundy school, and we were at chapel one day, and I think I was probably about 13 years old, and they come in and they're like, "Hey, we want to try something. We're going to turn the lights off and we want everybody to yell." And I remember thinking about this. I'm like, "Oh yeah, like we actually get to have fun." Like such such an uncommon thing to experience in the IFB. So like, yes, we get to be fun. We get to be loud. We're not being told to shut up all the time. And they turn the lights off and we all scream. And like it's a bunch of kids in a room, lights off. They're told they can yell. We yelled. And then they turn the lights on and they're like, "Now picture that in a lake of fire. And that will be what you will experience for all of eternity." Now, who's ready to pray a prayer?
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah.
So everything was a threat of hell. And I've often said, I absolutely have nothing but contempt for this mindset that we have to scare people to God.
Right.
I think Jesus is beautiful enough without this looming specter of like, "Oh, I'm going to throw you in a lake of fire." I just don't believe that's consistent with who God is as revealed through Christ. And so, that's kind of what I went into. And then I went to college and went to Texas A&M University. My family, we had moved all over because my dad's a pilot, and we had moved back down to Texas just so I could go to A&M and get that in-state tuition. It was a childhood dream. And, the violence and the anger and especially the rampant homophobia, that's where I really became homophobic. That's where I really it's all that internalized stuff that eventually is going to bubble out. And so I remember my youth minister in Texas, we had we had escaped fundamentalism and moved to the Southern Baptist.
Okay.
And our youth minister got arrested for sexually assaulting a young boy in the youth group.
Okay.
This wasn't his first time to be accused of this, and he had been accused of this at a church up in the Dallas area. And I took my what I had been raised on, that contempt and that hatred of queer people. And I remember the night, I believe he got convicted. I had a loaded gun and I wanted to go hurt somebody. I was pissed off. And because I blamed the wrong people because, I hated myself. And, so if I'm going to hate myself, I'm going to take it out on other people. And so I think it was after I got suspended from a city league softball team because of a violent outburst during a softball game that my parents were like, "Okay, hey, you need to go to anger management." But then I went to anger management, did all the things. And then I found the loophole. I found okay, I don't want to give up on violence, but I need to do it in a way that that people won't hate me for. So I'm going to join the army. I will be.
It's just amazing. Knowing you now, hearing about your violence and anger management and getting suspended and fighting. It's hard to believe, honestly. And I know, thank you for sharing your story, and I can't wait to hear more, but it's just I just want to stop and go, it's kind of blowing my mind,
Well, that's why I always laugh when people say, "Oh, if you truly repented, you would be transformed." And I'm like, so let me tell you who I used to be.
Right.
And
this is a transformation story. This is a story of new life in Christ here before our eyes.
And it was such a it's weird because, and we've talked about, my embrace of nonviolence and
Yes.
kind of get into that. And I always tell people I've got complicated feelings on the Army. I met some of the most amazing human beings that I would to this day have zero hesitation. I may not see them for a decade. I see them here, watch my kids. I have nothing but trust in you. Some of the greatest human beings that I have ever known in my life, but most of them are dead. And I've seen a lot of really good people get chewed up and spit out by that system. My friend Ricky, my friend Will was the first guy in the Army that knew that I ever came out to. And that's the one that hits me the hardest. And Will encouraged me to come out. He encouraged me to kind of like, hey, be you. And before I was able to do that, he had lost his life to just the scars of the psychological scars and the physical pain. And it breaks my heart that he never got to see me as me, but I would have never met Will if it weren't for the Army. And so it's kind of like this bittersweet type of relationship.
Yeah.
And
while you continue to talk, I'm going to share this picture of you from the Army days. I have to find it here. Okay, here we go.
Yes. That is me on Patrol Base Coppers Bridge. I spent 6 years in the Army as an infantry. I had actually enlisted to go Special Forces. I had originally went to Marine Officer Candidate School, and my first night getting out of my top bunk messed my knee up. So they sent me home, and the Marines, like, once you're broken, you're broken. And so I had actually applied for Army OCS and went before the board. There's a panel of like majors and bunch of high-ranking people, and I remember there's some major who asked me, tell me about this semester in college where you have like a 1.8 GPA for the semester. And I'm like, I had the answer. I was like, no, there's no excuse. I'm going to own that. I enjoyed the social aspect of college too much that semester. And he said, well, do you consider yourself somebody who learns quickly from their mistakes? And I was like, of course I do, sir. And he's like, well, explain to me the next semester. And, so now we're just arguing over a definition of what quickly means. But I did not get accepted to Army OCS. And I remember the recruiter had called me and asked if I wanted to come in and get my transcripts. And I'm like, well, sure. They cost money. Might as well go get a copy of my transcripts that I used. And he saw me coming from a mile away. He was like, well, hey, have you ever thought about enlisting? I was like, why would I do that? I've got a college degree. Granted, it's a political science degree with a really bad GPA, but it is a piece of paper on my wall. And I was like, but if I did, I would like to do intelligence or, the fighting stuff sounds really cool because I still had the violence kind of percolating in me. And he was like, I've got the thing just for you. Special Forces. And you can sign a contract to go Special Forces. And I'm like, oh, that sounds amazing. I started consuming the books about Special Forces.
Wow.
The Hunt for Bin Laden, all these different books that they had written. And but then I went to basic training. My third night there, in my sleep, rolled out of bed. My buddy Ricky, who I remember he had told me, because he was in the bunk next to me, he actually saw me fall out, and he said I did a head over heels kind of flip and landed flat on my back and fractured a vertebrae.
Oh my gosh.
So I decided the Special Forces was not for me, and they count on that. They count on people not making it through the program, because then I just became a regular infantry grunt. And we got stationed in Alaska, spent 3 years up there, and that's where I deployed from. And, it was one of those, I remember standing in a Walmart in Columbus, Georgia one time, and I was in my uniform, and this little girl comes running up to me. She throws her arms around me, and I'm looking like really confused. And this mom comes up and she's like, "Oh, we teach our kids to love and respect the military." I'm like, "Okay, great, but I know the people in the military. You may want to kind of rein that back in, because there are some shady people in the military." And but it was, here I am getting exactly what I joined for. I am somebody who is part of a violent machine, and I am being held up as a hero.
Wow.
And then I was in 2010, I had back surgery, or actually 2009, had to have a spinal fusion on my L5 and S1, because just the wear and tear, jumping out of airplanes. I was airborne infantry. And so I was medically retired in 2010 as a sergeant, and really didn't know what I wanted to do. My last couple of years, I had gotten my MBA, which was a miracle in and of itself, because I was dealing with the drug addiction, the pain pills. And I think the Army had me on 3 different antidepressants at one time, and the Percocet and the muscle relaxers, the sleep medication, all of this stuff. But I was able to get my MBA, and I just kind of stumbled into HR. And, which I have found out recently is not a very popular career choice, according to Twitter.
Right.
And, but I found a job that I loved, and it took us to Houston. And as much as I hate the state of Texas, moving to Houston was a move that changed our lives forever, because we had gone about 6 to 7, 8 years without ever going to church. And we had moved into a neighborhood in the Cinco Ranch area where there was a church right across the street from us. So I remember Heather and I saying, well, it's a Church of Christ. Heather grew up Church of Christ. And so we're like, hey, let's just visit. Our parents are going to ask. We can at least say we checked off that box. We didn't like it. Wasn't for us. And it changed our lives forever. For the first time, I felt love in the church. And the preaching minister there, Aaron, to this day, he sent me a text when I came out saying how much he loves me and affirmed me as his sister in Christ. And we still chat or text every now and then, but he's a chaplain in the Navy too. And so we, that was about 2012. And I remember Heather and I would read our Bibles. Like, we'd lay in bed and just read. And the red letters got me every time. And I would email Aaron and I'd be like, hey, am I crazy for reading like this? Because the way I'm reading this, I don't see how we can be anything but nonviolent. I see nonviolence all over this. And so I think it was about a year of studying and praying, fully embraced pacifism and nonviolence. And that's when I reached out Raw Tools. They're a nonprofit out of California that turns guns into garden tools. And if y'all are listening, www.rawtools.org, great organization. Mike Martin, who is the founder, he's just an amazing friend of mine. And really looking for tangible ways to promote nonviolence, to really challenge, or I guess, I don't know if make up for the bad that I did in the world. But I felt, yeah.
Go back just a little bit. Take a step back. Tell us about, when did you and Heather get married? When did that happen?
Oh yeah, that happened. We got married a month before I left for basic training.
Okay. All right.
We had met in 2002. By that point, I was already like, I'm going to join the Marines. And we had met in 2002. 8 months later, we got married. We were little children.
Yes.
And the picture on the right is from last year when Heather and I were able to renew our vows in Paris. Thankful for our amazing friend over there, Michelle Wahela.
Yes.
She's amazing. And Paige, who took these amazingly beautiful photos. And so, yeah, we got married in June 12th of 2004. And, you know, our marriage has, you know, we were talking the other day, I'm confident in our marriage because our marriage has gone through everything. But there's nothing that we haven't already survived. But I know that I think Heather and I disagree on exactly when I came out to her. She thinks it was a lot sooner than I did. Then again, maybe she's remembering warning signs or whatever. But I remember I'm going to say 2014 when I first came out to Heather. And at the time, her initial reaction was, okay, but I don't want to see it. And I don't want our kids to see it. And which is understandable.
Sure.
But to her credit, she didn't stop there. Once I told her, you can't unring that bell. And that's what we tell couples when somebody reaches out to me, kind of like where I used to be. And I'm like, one, I always encourage honesty, like you owe it to your partner. But two, once you tell them, there's no going back.
Right.
And it will change how they perceive you going forward. And Heather wasn't content with staying there. And so she grew and she learned. And I think it was about 2016 when I was in really bad state of depression when I had told Heather, I'm like, Heather, I remember we were living in an RV at the time. We had sold our house so we could downsize, kind of be closer to the houseless community in Houston. And we're laying in bed, or I think we're in the bedroom or some compartment of the RV. And I remember telling her, we both know where this is going. We both know that, like, to me, suicide was an inevitability. You know, one of the most fascinating things about my transition was how now I can see a future. I never envisioned Heather and I growing old together before. I just assumed I would end it eventually.
Wow.
And so I asked her, I'm like, let me take a bunch of pills, because we didn't have guns, because we're, and I let me take a bunch of pills, and you and the kids just let me drift off. Let me say, because I didn't want, one, to die alone, or two, for them to stumble into my body. So I asked, it was such a sincere question. I'm like, just sit here and let me drift away. Let me say goodbye. And, because I just couldn't take it anymore. And that's when she was like, well, go see a doctor. And the doctor, after seeing the doctor several times, kind of talking, therapist, all this stuff, I went back to Heather, and they're recommending hormone therapy. And I'm sorry, I am rambling.
It's all good. Keep talking.
And we sat down with the kids and said, hey, look, this is who I am. Here's the plan. I'm going to go on, start hormones for 2 months. And before any of the physical changes become permanent, and we'll get together as a family after 2 months, and we will all vote on it. And everybody has veto power. That was our mantra. We transition as a family, or we don't transition. And
how old were your kids at the time?
9 and 6.
Okay.
And they saw the cloud, that fog just went away. And I remember thinking, like, oh my gosh, do people actually walk around with like this clear mind?
Hmm.
it just blew me away. It was this unnerving feeling because I had never experienced it
Wow.
before.
Yeah.
And but we were content at the time of saying, hey, just hormones. I will just live as my old self, but
Hmm.
I'll continue the hormones. But the depression kind of trickles back in. And then in January 6th of 2020, I stepped out of the house for the first time as Natalie to go to
Wow.
work. And I thought 2020 would be the greatest year ever. And so,
Wow.
but at least I could celebrate on January 6th of 2021.
Yes.
Yeah.
Incredible. So, I mean, so much there, so much to celebrate. Thank you so much for sharing so much and so honestly. And a lot of things have come to my mind, a lot of questions. One of the things that I'm fascinated by, every day, you and I are out there on Twitter battling away, and I think we both love it and hate it at the same time, but we
Yeah.
love it more than hate it, or else we wouldn't keep doing it.
Yeah.
And one of the kind of like misconceptions that I think, or one of the myths about trans people, trans women in particular, that I think your story kind of beautifully demolishes,
Mm.
is this idea that trans women are just gay men
Yeah.
who want to dress up or whatever.
Yeah.
You're not a gay man, like
No.
clearly not. You're with a woman for one thing, and
Yeah.
you've stayed with a woman. You've always, as far as
Yeah.
I can tell, been attracted to women.
Yeah.
And so that kind of like, it flies right in the face of that narrative. Like everyone talking about Dylan Mulvaney, oh, he's just a gay man who blah 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 blah. That's just such a untruth. You know what I mean? And your story really just flies in the face of that untrue narrative about trans women.
It's funny because how you mentioned earlier about like when you were struggling with how like, oh, I wish I was a girl so you could be. I struggle with the same thing. Like that's where that I thought, because I'm a girl, I like, okay, being with a man will make me feel like a girl.
Yeah.
It like I no, not for me.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's this I get that a lot, and it blows my mind. And you see it with a lot of these kind of convoluted theories that are kind of floating around.
Yes.
That they're always looking for a way to explain away.
Yes, or discredit.
That this is just who we are. I know we've talked about stuff like ROGD, like with the rapid onset gender dysphoria.
Right. Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. This is a theory that is kind of this idea that, oh gosh, it's a social contagion.
Yeah.
It's brought on by TikTok, or whatever. Like adolescent kids are seeing, trans people, and they're wanting this because it's cool and whatever. And so it's this kind of rapid onset gender dysphoria. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Natalie?
Absolutely. So I get this a lot because, one, I get a lot of my parents must have just kind of groomed me to be a trans, like, trust me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love my parents. My parents love me, but I know that this is not who they want me to be.
Right.
That kind of rhymed, but, but the whole study that this is based off from Lisa Littman was, she interviewed parents, and the parents were all found from 4 very specific websites and forums, and they are all anti-trans websites, like Transgender Trend. I can't remember the exact names of all these hubs of gender critical ideology. And Lisa Littman did not interview a single trans person for this study. And what they found was, in this parental survey, which is really what it is, that parents had this perception that their kids they have trans friends. They they're saying that they're trans now because that's what their friends are doing. When in reality, especially anybody who's grown up queer, even when they're struggling, kids are good at identifying who is like them. Kids are good at identifying who is not like them as well.
Yeah.
And so, yes, trans kids or gender diverse, gender non-conforming kids, they naturally gravitate towards each other because odds are these kids are already getting bullied in school.
Right.
And so they have that just kind of naturally coalesces. But there's been studies done afterwards, that multiple studies that have debunked this wholeheartedly, that when you interview the trans kid, as well as the parent, is what you find is it's about a 2.5 to 3 year lead time that child has started wrestling with their gender. And they've kept it secret because they don't feel safe with their parents.
Right.
And so the parents have this perception oh, this is just coming out of the blue. My parents, when I came out to them at 36 years old, thought it was out of the blue.
Right.
They saw no warning signs of this. And, so it would be like, and I'm going to put it in football speak, it's like doing a survey and trying to come up with a theory to explain Alabama football fans by only interviewing Auburn football fans and claiming that this is a legitimate study. But as anybody knows, when it comes to LGBTQ people, facts don't matter. Once that little tidbit that conforms to what people already believe gets out, and it spreads like wildfire.
Right.
And what it's doing is harming trans kids. And I have nothing but contempt for the people who peddle this myth, because as somebody who was a trans child, I know how harmful it is to be told that, that's not really who you are. And so, but it is such a laughably bad, the methodology is so laughably bad that the survey had to get pulled. But in that world, especially as things get so politicized now, to that world, to that group, that's just evidence that this is the trans agenda trying to silence criticism.
Yes.
And it is, you get a lot of that junk science because it conforms to what people already believe.
Right.
And
so in addition to ROGD, there's another term that gets thrown around a lot in anti-trans discourse, and it's called autogynephilia. And this is the idea that transness is really just a sexual fetish that some men have that has to do with they get sexually turned on by the idea of themselves being a woman. And it starts perhaps by putting on women's clothes. We know that this is a real thing. Some men are turned on by wearing women's lingerie or whatever, but these men take it to the extreme of they want to be a woman themselves. And so to the point where they actually will, quote unquote, please don't, they'll mutilate their own bodies to, take hormones, cut off whatever, so that they themselves become, a woman. And this is a sexual turn on to them, a sexual fetish. This is being thrown around in ultra conservative circles as the reason that men particularly become quote, trans women. I think it's frankly bullshit. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, Natalie.
Well, I love, there's this, it's something that we don't talk about a lot. There's this almost latent misogyny behind all of this. They are grasping, trying to understand why somebody who, me, for example, I was on the top of our societal power structure. I was, to the world, I was a straight white man. And they can't fathom that I would give all of that up to be a woman. So clearly there's got to be something else at play here, because you don't really hear these theories being tossed about when it comes to trans men.
So true.
And you see a lot of the blindness that people have towards the existence of trans men when we see these bathroom laws getting proposed.
Yes.
But, all I can say, yes, are there people out there who have fetishes? Obviously.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make them trans.
Right.
And, I have been with the same love of my life, my best friend, we've been married for 19 years.
Yeah.
We've been together for even longer. And the notion that this is I go to work that's why I love the title of yes. We at our meetup last night, we had a meetup with a lot of Twitter friends in Chicago, and one of them asked me, so what do you do when you're out of Twitter? And I'm like, honestly, my wife and I watch TV.
Yeah.
Because we don't go anywhere, because our 13-year-old minivan is on life support right now. And so we sit there and we watch TV. We watch The Office. We watch Kitchen Nightmares. We are boring Midwestern women.
Yeah.
And, so I always laugh when people say, oh, that's a sexual fetish. I'm like, I live my life. I go to work, I come home, and, but we see that in the queer community, how or at least in our society as a general, how they view the queer community. Everything is through sexual terms.
Everything.
They can't, nobody thinks about queer sex more than straight conservative people.
Oh my gosh. I literally last night I was cracking up because I had kind of a wild couple of days on Twitter because Joel Berry of the Babylon Bee quote tweeted me on Friday night and put me on blast, which is fine. It gives me an opportunity to do my best to respond with love. Yeah. But there was one guy, I did my typical, I tried to respond to this one little troll, and he responded with, haha, I bet you're settling in for a night of debauchery or something like that. And I was like, a night of debauchery? My husband is 2,000 miles away. Tomorrow's church. What do you think I'm doing? Really?
Is that some new board game?
I know. It just made me laugh. And really, I get that so much on Twitter because I'm a gay man. I am 51. I am tired. I am probably watching Ted Lasso, and then I'm doing dishes, and then I am, I don't know what you think I'm doing.
Well, I mean, it's like when we get accused of grooming children. Our two kids are cisgender. I can't even trans my own kids. I'm not going to trans other kids. And there's just, and I think a lot of it has to do with purity culture. And, we have just this unbelievably sexualized society, and is so ingrained with heteronormativity at this point that they can't seem to grasp that queer people we're just people, and we do the same things that they do.
Yes.
We just do it better.
Okay, I have to bring up some of these comments because they're really good. Yeah. They accuse us of grooming, indoctrination, and propaganda when it's just education and open-minded acceptance. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Hannah says, read Sexed Up. Julia Serrano sets us all straight on fetishes. And as a therapist, she is spot on. Very little is a fetish or a disorder at all. We don't all worship the DSM. Joanna, just thinking that the signs that a child is trans are not warning signs, but simply signs. Thank you. That is such an excellent point. Leslie, Joel Berry blocked me. # blessed. Hannah agreeing. Amen. It's only dysphoric if the signs, I would say indications, are ignored. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what there's so much. A lot of trans people struggle with dysphoria because there's that disconnect. When we resolve that disconnect, the dysphoria, like my dysphoria, I very rarely get dysphoria anymore. Now I get it sometimes when I look in the mirror and I see, the vestiges because I wasn't able to transition when I should have been able to transition. And I think that's one thing that terrifies them. Well, one, I am so tired of hearing conservatives talk about trans children in terms of their ability to reproduce.
Yes.
It's gross. They're children. Stop seeing them as future breeders and start seeing them as people who bear the divine image of God.
Yeah.
And, so it's just this frustrating. And as much as we fight it, you and I fight it every day on Twitter. I don't know what it's going to take to get people to grasp this. You can have a straight couple adopt a child. Everybody thinks it's beautiful. You have a queer couple adopt a child, and all of a sudden, you get people talking about the horror. Like, this is what the problem with this is human trafficking and
yes, buying a child, blah blah blah. It's awful. Mm-hmm.
And so, but yeah, we moved up here to Grand Rapids, and
talk about that. What's your life like now in Grand Rapids?
A lot less sweaty. We don't melt anymore. I'm wearing a cardigan in July, but we came up here, and I remember I was driving around my first Sunday. I went to church with my friends Linnell and Dan and their kids, and we were driving around, and I was like, man, there are a lot of Reformed churches around here. Had no idea that this is like the heart of the Reformed churches in America, not RCA specifically, but Reformed.
Yeah.
And
you're in it.
So my experience with Reformed Christianity was Twitter. So I was not hopeful to find a church up here, and we found a couple. We had started going to one. We loved the people. Great church. I wasn't even the trans person. There was already a trans person there.
That's nice.
It was really nice. But we needed, like, our daughter needed like a more like the youth group, just kind of that. It just wasn't clicking for her. And so we had started going to a different church, and we knew, like, we just started going on Wednesday nights for the youth group, and we knew that it was our church. When our daughter went on an overnight camping trip, and they sent the standard guidelines, instructions, packing list home to the parents. And on it said, students will be assigned tent space based on the gender they identify. And I remember seeing that and crying because what it meant to have that kind of, and I spoke with the person who, is overseeing all that. And she didn't even it wasn't something it wasn't so much like this intentional, hey, I got to make sure I put it this way. And I love the way she's like, this shouldn't be something that causes, this should just be the norm.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, this is our church. And we have found, and this is just, it is a home for us. And it's a church that, for the first time, I think we truly feel safe and accepted. The first church we had started going to here in Grand Rapids, we felt that way as well. But this is where our daughter got baptized. This is they've just kind of come out as affirming. And but the CRC,
your church? Oh, nice. Yes. Okay. That's exciting.
But the CRC is the Christian Reformed Church is just, they took the exact opposite stance.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of what do we do now type of but what I love about our church is what they're basically saying is what we do now is we love and we welcome and we serve God together, and affirming, not affirming doesn't matter. We want to serve each other with love and respect. And so it's just been this amazing home for us. And I didn't even know at the time that I was like mutuals with like 3 or 4 of the people at the church. And I remember the first time going like, hey, I think I follow you on Twitter. And so yeah, the Grand Rapids is like those moments in life where you're like, okay, this is it. This is the right move. This is the right place. We are at home here. And just the world has opened up to us since we've moved up here. It's been such a, such a perfect fit for us.
Yeah. Gosh, Natalie, I cannot believe we've been talking for an hour. I feel like we could talk forever. If you have just a few more minutes, maybe we could open it up. Does anyone who is watching have a specific question? Please feel free to drop it in the chat. Karen, I like this. We know what you're doing in the evening, Matt, being kind to people on Twitter, throwing hate at you, and FaceTiming Alejandro. Yeah, that is true. That's basically my evening. Any questions, specific questions for the chat? Yeah, let's talk about Twitter for 2 minutes, Natalie, as we are waiting for any questions that might come in. It can be a cesspool. We know that.
Oh, yeah. Especially since a certain ownership change.
Yes. And we've stuck around, right? We've decided to stay. I don't know. What is your, like, I feel like you and I try to approach Twitter in similar ways, right? There are people, and we've talked about this even privately offline about how, like when I first came out, I decided long ago, I jokingly say kindness is the brand for me. And I joke about it, but I really mean it. Like, I really do want to always be like kindness first, try to display the fruit of the spirit. I really want that to be kind of like my calling card. And it's not always easy, but I try to deliberately choose that. Occasionally I get a little snippy, and that's fine, but I try to apologize. And I've seen you apologize. I love that. Like you do. You'll be like, I'm sorry, I was grumpy or whatever. Oh, where was I going with this? I had a good question. But like early on, I had this idea that everyone who wasn't doing it like me, people who were more angry, more strident, more in your face, more calling it out, like that they were wrong, and that and that it wasn't good for the movement, right? And that everybody else needed to do it like me. Like, hey, I would even call them out sometimes, like, that's not helpful. Like, if you're an angry gay, that's not really gonna help convince the middle people. Like, so back off. And I've really, really learned so much over the years. Like, let the angry people be angry. Let the people who are hurt have their hurt. Let the strident in your face people be strident in your face, right? That's not my calling. That's not where I'm going to exist, because that's not my personality. That's not my call. But it takes all of us together, all of us, the nice ones, the mean ones, the whatever, to move the movement forward. And I'm so grateful that I kind of finally learned that, like, together we're all doing the work of moving this thing forward. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely it does. I think that, for me, very much like you, like there's a quote from Doctor Who, huge Doctor Who fan.
Oh yeah, I've heard.
Always try to be nice, but never fail to be kind. That's how, like, there are going to be those moments where I slip up. I feel like I have them way too often, where I fail to be nice. But if I can always approach with kindness and with grace, that's where I feel comfortable. And I think for me, part of it is kind of my background. I've done the angry bit.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work for me. It's not good for my soul. So yes. And I think when we talked about it before, like we like, there's a place for everybody in this movement. I am not the fire. I am not the throwing the Molotov cocktail, kind of figuratively, of course.
Right.
Nobody throw those.
Right. Please don't.
But yes, there is that space for pushing and pushing and pushing. It's just not me. Right. And I think, what I've experienced here recently is recognizing that there are different approaches, but do I think that sometimes, I am not a big fan of pouncing on allies when they mess up. And
Right. Yes.
it is not my cup. It's not me. Now, I'm also not a big fan of, like, I try to bring conversations privately when I feel like when we need more than 280 characters to get our points across. And I think sometimes having those private conversations with people that you have those relationships with is much more effective. I've seen allies get pounced on, and I will just start DMing with them and saying, hey, look, just from my perspective, I understand, because they try to. The problem, I think, where we see a lot of tension is not everybody fits into the boxes. I get that a lot as a trans woman who is fairly conservative theologically. My big thing is I like the Nicene Creed. Without the filioque, go Eastern Orthodox. But that's where I kind of try to stay rooted in, is that ancient church faith. But not everybody shares that kind of more, I don't want to say conservative politically, but that more conservative theology. And but there's a place for it. It's not me. And sometimes, there's tension when I don't fit in that box. And sometimes I feel there, especially recently, I have felt very isolated because I feel like, okay, it's that almost that cliche of I'm too conservative for the left, too liberal for the right. And it's just kind of like, well, I'm just here. And it's even worse because, and I love the people who follow me and engage. But I don't like, that's not, I'm not an activist. I don't want to be an activist. I love engaging, but I never intended to build a platform. It happened organically. I came out in January of 2020. COVID happened. I found Weird Christian Twitter, and nobody was going to work because we were all stuck at home on the computer. And I just built this, found this community. And, but for the most part, I just like I've had people ask, what do you do if Twitter goes away? I'm like, I probably just go away. Like I just become, because I've tried the other platforms, especially every time there's a scare.
I know.
And I'm just like, I've got like 10 different apps on my phone. And I don't know where anybody is at this point. And so, but for me, I want to lead with grace. And that's what I want. Like, people may think I'm a heretic, but if they think I'm a gracious heretic, then I will take it. And, but that's not everybody's forte, or, that's not that. We need those people who push and push and push. I'm just a boring Midwestern house.
I love it. All right, I'm just going to do just a couple more comments. There's one question here from Hannah. She says, I'm so excited to be here and hear you both. You're both my heroes. Natalie, a trans kid and in a cult, and you're in church. This is pretty rare after cult life. And now as a trans woman, I mean, wow, you had some odds that would say you ought not still believe in God at all. And there you are. Was there ever any resistance to church?
Oh, absolutely. So like when I was in the Army, really didn't go to church. Now, when we had moved out of Houston in about 2018 to College Station, Texas, where I had gotten a job at my alma mater, there wasn't a church that we felt safe with there. And then COVID happened, and we had really gone a good 2 to 3 years. Like, it felt like, until we moved up here. And my struggle has always, like, there was a time when I'm like, I enjoy sleeping in on Sunday mornings. But I think what always brought me back and what's always kept me tethered to the faith, it isn't the church. I think it was, I think it may have been, we had a town hall meeting at our church after Synod, when the Christian Reformed Church had their big annual meeting and kind of reaffirmed their non-affirming. And I remember talking and completely blanked on where I was going with that. But, oh yes, I get that question a lot, especially as a trans woman in a Christian space. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why do you stay? And it's because at the end of the day, I truly do believe that Jesus Christ came, died, and rose again 3 days later. Everything else is, to me, that is the essential. Like, I stay in the church because I believe in the tenets of our faith. The church can be rotten. It can be evil. We see it we see it with the Southern Baptists and the sex abuse scandals and the cover up and the way they mistreat survivors and brutalize them and to where they're having to move to get away from these people. And but at the end of the day, for me, it's about Jesus. Now, I know a lot of queer people and a lot of people who have been hurt by the church are like, I'm done. And honestly, I don't blame them. But it is completely 100% understandable. And, I believe that God has, I don't hide the fact that I'm a universalist. And I believe that at the end of the day, God is love, and God knows. It's like when my friend Will had died by suicide, and I spoke delivered the eulogy for that at his memorial service. And that's one thing. I'm like, I know, you get these people who say, oh, you commit suicide, you go to hell. This horribly vile, evil doctrine. Or not even that's not even a doctrine. That's just a misteaching. And but I remember talking and thinking, like, I know that my friend was not a person of faith, but I know that God knows that the pain that he was in, the hurt the harm that he experienced from the church. I can believe what people tell me I should believe about him. But that would also mean that I believe that God is a bad person, that God is lacking all compassion and all empathy. And I know there's an element of the church who believes that empathy is a sin, and it's nonsense. So either I believe that a lot of the conservative church tells me, and believe that God is a horrible monster, or I just believe that God is good and that God is love, and that God will sort out everything through an expression of love. And what that looks like to me is Christ on the cross. And that's, to me, where it all begins and ends.
Yeah. I kind of feel like that's got to be the last word. Here's a couple more quick comments. Jaron Higgins, Matt, you're doing great work. Natalie, you're an absolute treasure. Karen, thank you both. This has been an utter delight, just like both of you are. Michelle says, love you, Natalie. And so do I. Thank you so much, Natalie. I will see you on Twitter. Everybody, please make sure that if you are there, you're following Natalie at natgrace79. Please check out my website at commonsanctuary.org. You can follow Common Sanctuary on Instagram at Common Sanctuary and Twitter at Sanctuary Common, because some troll actually has Common Sanctuary. He has like 2 followers and I can't find that. He hasn't used it in years.
And I will be on Twitter until Elon turns out the lights.
Me too. Follow me over there at Matt Nightingale. We'll be there till the bitter end, fighting the good fight, right, Natalie?
Yeah. So no, thank you so much for having me. I thoroughly enjoy anytime I get to talk to you. And one of these days we'll get that meet up with you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.